Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside National Security by the National Security Academy. I'm Cassian Peña, and today I'm joined by Dexter Ingram.
Hi, I'm Dexter Ingram. I'm the founder of Network and a historian.
And I work in the private sector. Me and Dexter both work together on this podcast. And today we have a very interesting subject, which is we're going to speak about the history of intelligence, the history of gathering information. And truly, information is important within business endeavors. If it's in investing, you really need to know basically the information of where a stock is going to go, company information. But the same if we look at national security, which is our main focus on this podcast. How is information used in national security? And sometimes, like we know, wars, the best wars are won before they even start, right? And that is mainly one with the garnering of good information. So, Dexter, I'm very happy to be joined with you today to talk about this very great and interesting topic.
I'm super excited to talk about this too. This is what they call the world's second oldest profession, espionage or spying. If you look back, even cavemen and early man would climb trees to find out, where food was or where danger was or where the next village was, or to kind of get an understanding of what was around them. So it's been around for a long time. It's kept us alive. It's kept us fed. It's kept us safe. So let's get into it.
Great. So, Dexter, I would say we should start off with the most relevant and upfront question, which is within national security, how is information used and intelligence used for strategy and for all the endeavors that one gets into?
Yeah, there's different intelligence sources. Human intelligence, or what we get from people, is what has kind of lasted throughout time. That human intelligence is something that we still, with all the advent of satellites and technology and all of the high-tech NSA, National Security Agency kind of listening devices and things like that, human intelligence is something that we always want to protect. We always really want to protect all our sources and methods and really not go into specifics about those. But as we look at intelligence and spying throughout history, whether it was the Egyptians or during the feudal systems, there have been books written about this for millennium. I mean, you have Sun Tzu and The Art of War, right? You have Machiavelli and The Prince. All these really focus on spying and not just war, but intelligence.
Right. And like you mentioned, The Prince from Machiavelli or Sun Tzu, The Art of War, I mean, they contain so much wisdom, which is still relevant to this day. I know many different companies sometimes even mandate that you might read The Art of War or some similar books because they're just important for strategy. Again, it can be for business, but it can also be for public sector work. And so, Dexter, if we look at maybe the biggest information gathering institutions, some might be think tanks, which I know you worked in as well in the past, or they can be, for example, spy agencies, right? So how would you say these agencies were created in the first place, and why do we even need agencies which gather information?
Yeah, I think, well, the US basically institutionalized its intelligence agencies after World War II. After World War II, you had, need for kind of a permanent intelligence system. In World War II, the British had their special operations folks, their SOEs, and we had the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, which later became the CIA. After World War II, we created the Pentagon. We created the Air Force. It used to be Army Air Corps. We created the CIA. Just like after 9/11, we also recreated a lot of things that were really needed. The Homeland Security Department, taking things that really protected the homeland and put them together so they can better communicate.
Yes.
We created the National Counterterrorism Center, which kind of was a fusion cell between law enforcement and intelligence when it came to counterterrorism. So we're constantly looking at ways we can better take these different streams of information and put them in a way that the average person who needs them can digest them and connect the dots.
And Dexter, could you explain the intricacies within, let's say, cipher or these different functions of using language and using numbers and codes and whatever it might be to decipher and understand information? How could one see this in the past? and how are they still applied in the present day?
Yeah, it's a super good question. If you look at the Spartans back in the day, they had what they called a skytail. This was basically a stick, a wooden stick that was kind of like a walking stick. But the person who was sending the message and the person receiving the message would have a stick that was basically the same width. And they would take a leather strap, wrap it around their stick, write out their message, and then send it off via carrier. If you're looking at this leather strap without the stick, it just looks like gibberish. But the person on the other end would take this strap, wrap it around their stick, and they would be able to read the message. So that was the real kind of beginning of some kind of ciphers. And then you even had folks in Roman times like Julius Caesar. He had the Caesar cipher, which basically would take, the alphabet and say, we're going to change it 3 over. So instead of an A being an A might be a D, right? Or an A might be a C, whatever it may be. But it would be that way throughout the whole alphabet.
If we look at gathering intelligence or everything in regards to this sector, sometimes the normal picture is a person like on their laptop as well, whether it's the different codes and whatever going down the screen. And in the end, if we look at it, I mean, technology did change, but the base of all that technology comes from those times, didn't they?
Absolutely. Like I said, how you do things, how you hide things, really kind of getting people to underestimate what you're doing and who's working for you. All those things kind of play into a good spy network, right? During the Revolutionary War, you had George Washington, who set up the first civilian spy ring. And he took basically a major and put him in charge of it. And this major used a lot of his friends, his friends' spouses, friends he went to college with, friends he kind of grew up with as part of this spy network. They trusted each other, and they were able to really kind of get ahead of the more superior firepower and manpower of the British, using guerrilla warfare, using misdirection, using misinformation. All these things that we see nowadays really was groundbreaking back then.
If we look at gathering information, 3,000 plus years of very well documented information on what people did to spread information from point A to point B. Do you have a certain time within history that you feel is your most interesting one, or the one that fascinates you the most?
For when I was younger, it was the Cold War, right? But being older, I look at World War II. There was so much in World War II that just kind of blew my mind. I mean, the saboteurs that the British and the French and the US had, it was truly fascinating. I mean, how we would take common things and ship them to our prisoners of war in German stalags, like Monopoly sets, and everything inside there was either money or a saw or a map or a way to escape. All that kind of hidden intelligence, all the buttons on their uniforms and the pen nibs on the writing materials were all compasses too. So maps and compasses were really important before GPS. Finding your way back, because if you were a pilot or a saboteur, you were really highly valued. There just wasn't an infinite amount of them. So we really wanted them to come back. And then looking at the folks that were recruited that didn't fit the image of the average spy. Typically when you look at spies, you think of fit and shape, young, certain folks like that. Well, if you look at the Special Operation Executive in World War II or the Office of Strategic Services in World War II, many people had differing abilities. You had Virginia Hall. She had one leg, and she was one of the most feared spies in France. She basically walked over the Pyrenees to escape, but she had so many Nazis after her, and she was communicating on a regular basis. Somebody who would never be used normally in some kind of, normal military operation was a true hero in World War II. And we see that across the board, whether it's celebrities like Josephine Baker or folks that were underrepresented and not treated super well, like the Native American Marines who were code talkers during World War II. Their language in and of itself was a very unique code that nobody else could understand. So even if the Japanese or the Germans were listening to these Navajo and Comanche Marines speaking over open radio, they would have no idea what they're saying. Of course, they would use different words. Like instead of tank, they would use metal tortoise, or instead of grenade, they would use potatoes. But they would get their point across. And these are true heroes. Again, this is a country that doesn't have the greatest track record when it comes to taking care of certain disadvantaged groups. And you see folks stepping up to serve. So my hat's off to them.
That's very correct, Dexter. So, Dexter, I think for both business, for national security, for everything we talked about today, it's so important to gather good information, double check sources, right? Not only rely on one source, make sure that the information you get isn't false. That's very important, especially nowadays with so much information which is around us. Double check and always as well protect the source that you're representing. So thank you so much, Dexter.
It's been my pleasure. Happy to talk about this anytime. Take care, Cassian.
Thank you.